Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Rumcast. This is the podcast where we talk all things rum with the people who love and shape the category. I'm Will Hookinga, and on the other line, as always, I have your other host, John Gullah. How's it going, John?
Hey, I'm great, Will. Life is good here in Miami, and experienced some really good rums lately. Excited for today.
Why do you always have to throw in everyone's face that you live in Miami? You're always like, life is great down here in Miami. Like, I'm sitting up here in cloudy, gray, rainy Nashville today, and you're just like throwing it in not only my face, but everyone's face who doesn't get to live in a tropical paradise.
Well, it's more to throw in your face, Will, more than anybody else. But it is nice here in Miami, although we've seen some 50s recently, so I imagine a lot of the country is suffering greatly.
Yeah, but that's terrible. I feel horrible for you.
Yeah,
50-degree temperatures is rough.
I can't help it if I love Miami and I love this place and it's such a nice rum place, Will.
Yeah.
I just have to laud its qualities. Hey, Will, before we get into our rum content for today, I did want to ask you something.
Okay.
Have you seen the TV show on Disney Plus, WandaVision, yet?
Well, as soon as you said Disney Plus, I knew that I had not seen it because I don't get Disney Plus. I didn't get the Disney Channel growing up as a kid. I was always envious of it. And I think it's kind of grown or like rooted some Disney resentment in my life because I'm not one of those people that like wants to go to Disney World or anything. Yeah. And I know some people love it. I know a lot of the rum fans out there, they're always going on and on about Trader Sam's and Disney this, Disney that. Yep. And so I guess I'm just being Mr. Anti-Disney on the podcast today.
I think we just have to cancel the podcast now, Will. I think that's it. We're done. We're done
you
here.
asked me if I'd seen one
folks.
show on Disney Plus, and I just like flamed the entire Disney brand. So I'm sorry about that. Please tell me about this show.
All right. Well, okay. So that's understandable. It's fine. You know that I'm not only a huge rum geek, but I'm just like a big geek in general.
Right. I do know that.
I love the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Have you even seen like any of the Marvel Cinematic movies or?
I honestly I have not seen any of them since whenever the first X-Men movies came out.
Oh my God, that's not even MCU.
Avengers. I only know Thanos from the memes, online.
Wow.
Okay. This is completely beyond me, but please, continue.
I'm going to talk right past you then. Yeah. But I will say that for those of you out there, listeners, WandaVision is really creative, and I really missed the MCU over the last year a lot because there hasn't been any content until now. I know some people are a little put off by the early episodes because they're doing this weird kind of sitcom shtick that is very different and unique. But I promise that listeners, hang in there because if you get through episode 4, you will be rewarded. It is really awesome and really cool.
So WandaVision, that's the name of it? Okay.
Yes, it's WandaVision, which you would know, Will, if you spent some time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that Wanda is Scarlet Witch and Vision is
I know
Vision.
Wakanda.
No, this is totally separate. This is going way far out. All right, let's bring it back, though. That led me to thinking as I was watching this. As I said, I love the Avengers. I assume you do know at least the Avengers, right? Iron Man, Thor, Hulk.
Yes.
Captain America.
I'm familiar with the characters' names.
We can consider them like a cultural touchdown at this point. For most
definitely.
People, not Will, but for everybody else.
Part of the zeitgeist. Zeitgeist? Zeitgeist.
Yes.
Zeitgeist.
Good German word there. So I wanted to ask you and maybe then our listeners, who are the rum Avengers out there? So I know that the Guardians of Rum exist, and this isn't competing with that in any way. I mean, just purely for fun and discussion, who are the rum personalities that we would cast as the Avengers for rum? So I'll start. Okay. Richard Seal is a shoo-in for Iron Man in pretty much every way. And I guarantee you there will be a high level of agreement there. So I think his ability to innovate and his general demeanor very much matches up with Iron Man, which I guess that pretty much makes Gail Seal Pepper Potts or Rescue as well.
Okay.
So
I'm not going to be as good with matching them up with the personalities, but I feel like I can throw out some rum people who definitely should be in the conversation.
Yes.
I can't map them to the right characters, but I mean,
that's the listeners. I feel like we'll let them do it.
I feel like Richard Seal is one. Joy Spence has to be in there.
Yes.
You're going to want Luca Gargano probably to throw a non-distiller out there.
Yep.
Let's see.
Maggie Campbell, I believe. Maggie Campbell.
Sure. Although when she was on the show, I think she picked DC Comics over Marvel.
Oh, she's out. She's out. That's it. Sorry, she's Wonder Woman, which is great. but that's a separate universe. Yeah.
I love it. So this is I like where this has gone. If you're listening and you have thoughts on who should be included as the Rum Avengers cinematic universe and which character they should be, send those in to host@rumcast.com. That's host@rumcast.com. We would love to hear those and maybe read a few of them on a future episode.
Leave us a comment on social media too. That's another way, we can start this conversation and have it fire off on Facebook or Instagram, definitely. Yeah. So Rumcast on Instagram or Facebook too. Okay, so let's get into some rum stuff proper here.
Yeah, let's get into it.
We received some really good feedback, Will, from our first Rerum segment back in episode 18. Yeah, and I think people liked it, and they enjoyed that as a segment, so I figure that means it's time we do another one.
Why not do it again? Yeah, I think, we have a great interview to get to today with St. Lucia Distillers,
yes.
So I want everyone to know that is coming, but before we do, I am prepared and ready to go with today's Rerum segment.
Excellent. So I guess for those of you who may not have heard back in episode 18, as a reminder, this is a recurring segment where Will and I get back into our existing rum cabinet and look to highlight a rum that we haven't really seen or visited or tasted in a while. And I guess we take a sip of it again with fresh eyes, or I guess that would be fresh tongue.
Fresh taste buds.
Fresh taste buds. And then we talk about it, and we call that segment the Rerum. So, Will, why don't you, I think, start this time, and let's go through yours.
Yeah, so I picked a rum that I've mentioned on the podcast before, and longtime listeners may remember it from a segment we did about disappointing rums and what to do with them. I mentioned a rum back then that was given to me as a gift, and I went into it with very high expectations because it was a rum that I'd seen pop up again and again as people's favorites. And ultimately, my first impression of it was it was on a segment about disappointing rum, so I was disappointed, obviously.
Yeah.
That rum was Santa Teresa 1796.
Gotcha.
From Venezuela, which, again, I see people recommend this rum all the time. People whose, tastes I feel like are similar to mine sometimes. It's one of those, broad appeal rums, I feel like. And so I wanted to go back to it, give it another chance. And so I have a fresh bottle of it right here that I got actually because I'm participating in an online tasting this week with Santa Teresa. So I'm looking forward to it. I got into it a little bit early and,
No, not enough willpower. Oh God!
No. I did it. I did it for the podcast. We needed some content. So
okay.
I think the problem with my first experience with this rum was when I come to a new rum for the first time, my perspective is always, especially with something I'm excited to try, I get excited about, is this something that I'm going to love, And so if it doesn't match that, it's like the first feeling is disappointment, right?
Right.
But what I'm trying to get myself to be able to do better is not necessarily to always analyze, is this something, how does this weigh compared to my expectations, but try to analyze it for what it is. Why do other people, if I don't like this, why do other people love it? And so I was bringing that perspective to this rum again for the second time, because like I said, it's something that lots of people really love. And so I kind of wanted to, come to it with fresh eyes and see. Sure. And I will say, a much better impression of this rum this time than I did the first time. There's some things about it. I don't gravitate towards 80 proof rums as something to just, sip on their own that much. So I think last time, initially, I was already kind of setting myself up to not really like it just because of that. Yeah. But I will say it drinks really well for its proof. And, another brand that we'll talk about in the interview, actually, that releases most of its rums at 80 proof is Admiral Rodney.
That's right.
And that's another one that I think tastes really great. I'd still, if I had my druthers, I'd love that rum at a slightly higher proof.
Druthers?
I had to throw out the word druthers there.
Are you an octogenarian? Is that word feels interesting and dated?
I am an old man at heart. So anyway, I think there's still something, a few things that I appreciate about this rum. It is a Solera rum, which can produce some controversial mixed feelings for people.
Right. And you knew that going in. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I appreciate about it is on the label of the rum. I think usually what people get frustrated with Solera is it'll be a Solera rum and they'll put a number or even sometimes an age statement on the rum that's just tied to whatever the oldest rum that goes into the blend is.
Or just some random number in general. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, like I won't name any specifics, but like 23 or something like that, just to throw one out there. It's totally random.
Michael Jordan.
But on the bottle, like it says Solera rum. There is a number, but it's 1796, so it's pretty clearly a year. No one's going to confuse that for an age statement. And
would be cool though.
On the back, it doesn't say anything about rums up to X amount of years. There's nothing about the age at all. It just says Solera rum.
Right.
So I think I like the way it feels like a good representation. They're not trying to trick you or, pull the wool over your eyes or anything. And I really appreciate that. There is some kind of lingering sweetness with this rum that feels a little too sweet to me. So I think that can also be perhaps why it appeals to a lot of people who are newer to rum.
I agree.
Kind of an easy transition. But it has some really nice qualities. And I don't I'm going to sound like an idiot here, but sometimes you have ways you describe things in your head that only make sense to you.
Yes. Every day for me. Yeah.
I don't have the reviewers, tasters vocabulary yet to communicate, the notes and things I pick out. But there's this one quality that I pick up sometimes, and in my head I call it barrel perfume. It's kind of like the qualities of a barrel. So, oak, vanilla, some of that toastiness, but it kind of meets this almost like floral quality.
Okay.
And when I feel that in rums, in my head, I say barrel perfume. It's something I get from Foursquare rums a lot.
Right.
And I really like it, and I detect a little bit of that in this rum, and so I have a much better impression of this rum the second time around.
Yeah,
it's still not something that I would go back at again and again to buy a bottle, but I have a greater appreciation now for what it is and why people do like it. So that is mine.
And we did learn that rum and perfume do have some crossover there, so that's totally interesting. Yeah. And also I agree with your statement about it being kind of a transition, a good rum for transition, and that's not to mean it's relegated only to that, because I know there's plenty of people who are rum lovers who still love this rum.
Exactly.
And that's great too. But I will back up your statement by saying, I don't know if I recall telling you this story, but recently a friend of mine retired at work, and I gave him a bottle of Santa Teresa 1796 as a retirement gift, and he texted me back, I think it was one day later, saying they drank the entire bottle in one night.
Wow. And
he was kind of a person who dabbled in rum a little bit.
Okay.
He knew a little bit more, but also wasn't a rum geek by any standard like us. So I agree that that's a great rum that kind of takes the next step into complexity for people. And it's a really good rum for that purpose, for sure. And I appreciate it for its qualities as well. I think they do a good job. I think that's a good pick and a good re-rum review.
So what about you? What have you got for us today?
Okay, so I have two reasons for choosing this bottle as my re-rum today. The first is going to be very obvious, and the second perhaps is slightly more interesting for discussion, but interestingly tied into what you talked about.
Okay.
So I'll start off with a quick story of how this came to be back in, I think it was August of 2019, way back when the world was a better place. My wife wanted to buy a nice rum for my birthday. And so wisely, instead of guessing herself as to what that would be, she had decided to surprise me with a trip to a nearby well-known liquor purveyor with a very broad rum selection.
That's fun.
So she was like, hey, let me know what you want and pick out pretty much whatever bottle you want. And needless to say, I was like a kid in a candy store.
It's like when your parents take you to Toys R Us as a kid.
Exactly. And it was so awesome. And Melissa, by the way, if you're listening, let's do that again. That was awesome. Best birthday gift ever. So after much deliberation on my part, probably too much time, I went with the Chairman's Reserve 1931 bottle.
Which okay. I see the tie-in now. Yes. I see the connection.
Yes. And it retailed for about $100 when I bought it. So it was, especially back then, I was just starting to break into higher price point rums.
Yeah.
And so this was one of the initial investments that was a little bit higher for me.
Sure.
So I had also a couple of St. Lucia rums at this point already, but I felt like I was ready to step up that, and I would feel confident I would enjoy this. So here's where things get a little bit more interesting. I get home. And I opened this bottle, and this is my thoughts from way back when as I'm remembering it. And I liked it. But I'd hesitate to say at that point that I loved it. And I compared it against my beloved Admiral Rodney's bottle and a few other St. Lucia rum samples I had around. And I could immediately tell the 1931 is more complex. It had more depth. But I think that it wasn't my favorite at that point in the St. Lucia lineup. So now, fast forward to maybe 6 or even 8 months later, and I go back to it, and I did enjoy it a little bit more. I didn't remember doing any A/B testing or anything. But now, let's talk about, I've gone back to this as my Rerum just last night and today.
Okay.
And I sat down with this bottle thinking, all right, and boom. Let me tell you, there is something different here. And Will, I shit you not, you can call me names, you can tell me it's in my head, but I'm telling you that this bottle has somehow matured or something is different.
I think you're different.
And I agree. You're probably right.
I mean, you said this was back in 2019, your last experience, so I think we're all different people at this point, let's be honest.
I agree, and I thought that as well, that's a possibility here.
We've all aged 10 years in the last year and a half.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. So the bottle's about 1/3 gone now, which is, I think, important for part of the discussion. And I wanted to ask you, has this ever happened to you before? I think you kind of confirmed it with maybe a little bit of the Santa Teresa in an evolution, but have you ever had this happen to you where you've gone back to a rum and it's gone from just okay to freaking amazing?
So, yes, but I think it's always happened. I've never suspected that it was some kind of change in the bottle. I know sometimes if you like open a bottle and let it breathe, kind of, people will say that it can open up a little bit more. I don't think I've personally experienced that, but I'm not the type of person to like really take detailed notes of my impressions or like write down my thoughts on stuff like that. So it's really just kind of like shooting from the hip analysis when I compare my enjoyment of something at some point to it in the past. I don't have like ratings to kind of like compare them to.
Sure.
So I've always just suspected it's like, something has evolved with my tastes, or I'm just, it's the context that I'm trying it in now that is causing me to respond to this differently.
Right. I agree with you. And I think clearly my taste has evolved over that span of time too.
Sure.
But I mean, I'm telling you right now, this 1931, I would put it up against my favorite rums ever at this point.
Wow. What about, how does it compare? Because I know you've had some experience with the Chairman's Reserve Master selections.
Yeah.
How does it compare to those?
Well, so I only had samples of those, the ones that we did with the Florida Rum Society pick that is coming out too. And I've had a couple other Master selections as well, which have all been really good. The difference here, I believe, is in the blend, which we talk about a lot in the interview today. And we get in more in depth into that. And I think there's a difference in terms of the pot versus column blending here. There's a difference in terms of some of the aging components. And I know that even this one has a slight bit of sugarcane juice.
Right, the sugarcane juice distillate.
So I don't know if that's the difference or if other Chairman's Reserves have also incorporated some of those, not all of them. But I will say this, I guess let me give my brief tasting notes here of what it is and a little information so that people are aware of that. So this is the 5th edition white label 1931. And this was bottled in 2017. It's a 46 ABV, which for me, that sits just right there. It's an aged blend of the column and pot stills between 6 and 11 years old. I will also say, and I know that we differ in this subject, but the bottle is lovely. It's a wide
I've never thrown any shade at the 1931 bottles. I've just pointed out that I think the fancier bottles kind of tug at your heartstrings a little bit.
They absolutely do influence me. I make no mistake that they do. But I love presentation, and I feel like for me, when the presentation matches the rum, it enhances the overall experience.
Sure.
And this presentation, the chunky cork stopper, the small little label that shows off the gorgeous rums like maple syrup color here, it just works for me.
I love a chunky cork stopper.
Yeah. So one of the best features on this is the nose. It's a wonderful nose, and it's one of those rums that like comes out and meets you and says hi before you even get a chance to like acknowledge it and properly nose it. Yeah, but I love that about it, and you can certainly get what I get is maybe like, I don't know, I'm reaching here too, like Will, like you said, my vocabulary is not up to par with this, but like brown butter and dark chocolate. are two things I get, and you certainly get the pot still influence in the nose. In terms of taste, I think it's really complex, as I mentioned, and deep character. You get the hints of the oak and the spice, but it's not overpowering. There is a sweetness to it, but it's understated, which is just kind of the way I like it. And I think it was most interesting for me was how all of the different stills that they use in St. Lucia Distillers are incorporated into this product in such a way that it makes it just freaking fantastic. So
yeah, I think one of as you mentioned, we touch on the 1931 blends,
right,
with Denny Duplessis on the interview coming up, who is the master blender. And I think one of the interesting things about 1931 was like for the first few years, it was like a new distinct blend every year.
Yes.
And it's only been in recent years that they've settled on kind of like a foundational, like, it's the same blend basically, but in order to create that blend, they kind of went back to all those individual 1931 blends and like what are the best components for each of these, and like how do we combine them into what's going to be the kind of static blend going forward. And I really enjoyed getting to hear him talk about that.
I swear I didn't plan this, but it's kind of like the Avengers of St. Lucia rum.
It's
got all the best parts.
Nailed the intro this week.
Bam.
I love it. Yeah, that's great. And I think all of this is just, kind of why we wanted to do this Rerums segment in the first place. Is it's just fun to kind of go back to rums we've had before and see how our thoughts have shifted over time. So thank you for sharing. And with all that said, I think we should get over to the interview now, which this week, as we've mentioned, is with St. Lucia Distillers, specifically with CEO Margaret Monplaisir and master blender Denny Duplessis. And yeah, I mean, our conversation kind of runs the gamut. I think one of the things we first think about when we talk about St. Lucia Distillers is just like the sheer variety of all the distillates they're able to produce there. We talk about the 4 different stills they have.
The different
making
casks.
Both molasses-based rum and sugarcane juice rum. They're growing 15 acres of sugarcane there on site, and also the wide variety of barrels that they've been using for a really long time, actually. And we talk a lot about how the vision of Laurie Barnard, who was part of the family, that started the distillery, and who unfortunately passed away in 2012. But how his kind of vision was really ahead of its time in what this rum distillery should look like. And so I'm excited for people to hear this. Should we get into it?
Let's do it. It was a great interview. I was really happy with the amount of passion that these people have comes through so much in spades, and it was such a fun conversation. So let's get to it. Hey, Rumcasters. If you love rum like we do, there are 6 simple but meaningful words that are likely to get your attention. Single barrel, cask strength, no additives. Those 6 words are the whole premise behind the single cask rum releases from Holmes Key, the sponsor for this episode of the Rumcast. Holmes Key seeks out the world's best rums and releases them unadulterated and at cask strength in limited editions. Check out their website at holmeskey.com to learn about current releases distilled at places like Foursquare in Barbados, Demerara Distillers in Guyana, Travelers Liquors in Belize, and South Pacific Distilleries in Fiji. And be sure to look out for new releases of limited editions that are releasing soon in 2021. Find them at Holmes Key, that's HOLMESCAY.com. Now back to the show.
All right, so we are here with Margaret Monplaisir and Denny Duplessis, the CEO and master blender, respectively, at St. Lucia Distillers. And I wanted to tell you both, I don't know what's going on, but it seems like every time I turn around and talk to someone about rum in my life right now, your distillery keeps coming up. I think John and I have probably mentioned it just anecdotally in like the past 3 or 4 episodes we've done. And so I feel like it's just meant to be that we need to talk about St. Lucia Distillers right now. It's like it's having this little moment in our lives. So I'm really happy that you're both here to talk about it with us today.
You've just made my day. Oh, wow.
A pleasure.
Oh, wow.
Always a pleasure.
Oh my God! After this,
well, there are no accidents.
You became my new best friends. Okay, excellent. That is exciting news.
Yeah, and I don't know. It just feels like there's just like energy around St. Lucia rum right now. I know me personally. I'd had like Chairman's Reserve Original and stuff like that, but it wasn't until the past year or so that I really was like, I really want to get to know this distillery more. So I started diving into some of the master selections, getting to know the individual stills a little bit more, getting some Admiral Rodney in my life, thanks to John, my co-host.
That's right.
So it's been
Admiral Rodney.
Yeah, it's just been this exciting year of discovering this whole new kind of category of rum. So we're excited to talk about it with you.
That is really good to hear. The awareness of St. Lucia Distillers really has come about with the investment with the company GBH purchasing St. Lucia Distillers in 2016, and us being now part of the Spiribam group. For many years, we were there making our rum quietly, but we didn't have the confidence. I mean, we had Laurie Barnard, who was leading our company, who was very much into making all these beautiful rums. But it wasn't about making money, and he didn't do it for money or anything. It was about making rum. He loved rum, he lived rum, and that's all we did. And it was St. Lucians got to enjoy it for all these years. So having GBH come on board and the Spiribam group now, really taking our rums global and seeing the response. That's why I said you guys are my new best friends. Just seeing and hearing, it almost brings tears to our eyes, and really makes us at St. Lucia Distillers feel good, and it makes a country feel good. When St. Lucians travel and they see our products around the world, it's like people send back pictures for us. They come out on the media. I mean,
so cool.
It is a proud moment for St. Lucians and for St. Lucia. So thanks, guys. I'm really happy to hear it. And a lot of work has gone into making us who we are today,
Yes, absolutely. And before we talk about the rum itself, we always like to start by talking a little bit about your backgrounds and how you got where you are. And Margaret, I want to start with you because I heard you refer to this story quickly in another interview recently. And I have to ask, is it true that you first started working for the Barnard family as like a summer job while you were in school?
Yes, that is absolutely true. I had my holiday job every summer. I would go and the Barnards owned hotels along with the distillery. And it was really with Laurie's brother, Craig. Every summer he gave me a job. And I mean, obviously I used that money to buy my school books and so, so it was guaranteed. And so as soon as I left school, I didn't immediately join the company, but I went working elsewhere first. And then Craig Barnard walks in and he sees me. Then he goes, "Wait a minute, what are you doing here? You're supposed to be working for us."
Wait, where was this other place you were working? It
was a car dealership. He came in to buy a car, and I had applied for a job there because it was very close to my home, within walking distance, so it was convenient. And he was so upset and he insisted that I had to come back and work with them. And that's when he put me in charge of a distribution company that they had in place, Bobby, which then meant that I started selling rum from St. Lucia Distillers. And that's how the whole process started, because as the rum grew, then his brother, who was managing, so Craig managed the hotel side of the business and continues to this day. They own 2 hotels, Rendezvous and Les Port. Laurie managed the distillery, and he was into he had a farm and whatnot. And Laurie then started interacting with me much more as I would be selling the rums being purchased by St. Lucia Distillers. And he said, "Wait a minute, why doesn't St. Lucia Distillers take over Margaret and that distribution company and really focus on getting our rums, and taking our rums to the new level?" And then so after 10 years of working under Craig's guidance, I then started to work fully under Laurie's guidance, and he became my mentor, and he took me on my journey through rum. So yes, I started selling it, and then I started learning about producing it. I got into the operations of St. Lucia Distillers. I started looking after HR and, the whole operating side, working alongside Laurie. In the meantime, learning the process, learning about rum, and really catching, his passion and the love he had of rum it was contagious. Denny has been around for a few years, and I mean, Denny caught on to that as well. Everybody, you speak to Ian, you speak to Lennox, you speak to Michael, everybody on our team, everybody's all gung-ho and excited about rum and where rum can take you. So yes, so that's how my journey started, and that's how, of course, Laurie passed in 2012. And I became his successor at that point. I continued to run the company since his passing. Well, since being owned by GBH, we now have a new French boss, a managing director who's come on board, Mr. Leger. But I'm still there working with the team at doing the best job we possibly can. Right, Denny?
Yeah, of course, definitely.
So you sold the Barnard family a car, and they sold you on a love of rum for the rest of your life.
I like that version.
That's the headline.
So that's it. Yes, that is indeed what happened.
Great. So, Denny, we'll turn to you. So I know you became a master blender back in October, I think it was, of 2020. And
yes,
but
that's correct.
As Margaret said, you've been on the team for years. Before we kind of talk about that, I wanted to zoom way out and hear a little bit about how you got started with rum in the first place and what led you to where you are now at St. Lucia Distillers.
Okay, well, I've been around St. Lucia Distillers for the past 12 years.
Okay.
I started when I came in as a lab assistant, basically carrying out lab duties in terms of quality control and quality assurance checks. And over the years, I grew up where I became the quality control inspector, where I handled some of the process checks, but I went deeper into raw material inspection. And of course, part of that quality control checks involved sensory analysis, where I got involved a little deeper. I was privileged to do some training through the WSPA group with my other distillery colleagues to sharpen on my skills. And of course, working alongside the retired master blender, Mr. Ivanius Harris, he actually passed on some of the skills in terms of assessing our maturates and distillates that we currently have at St. Lucia Distillers, and how to signature each one so that as a blender you could know and understand each one inside out. So at that point you could know how you could go ahead with your blending to develop whatever material that is put forward, whatever project. And of course I grew alongside him, and unfortunately, he had to leave. He's retired now, but I'm honored to carry on that task, to continue his journey to continue producing world-class rums on behalf of St. Lucia Distillers.
Yeah, and so you're living proof of growing with the company St. Lucia Distillers.
Yes, most definitely, and I feel very grateful for all the opportunities given to me to train, both in terms of my technical skills and of course my sensory skills. So I'm here today to contribute towards the success and well-being of this company from now till I leave.
Yeah. And as far as like a day-to-day basis of what you do now, what's it been like stepping into that role recently and doing what you're doing now?
Well, stepping on to that role, apart from being the master blender where I oversee product development for rums, and of course, keeping a close eye and check on our distillates and maturates in conjunction with the cellar master, I also have the duties of performing the laboratory supervisory role, where I oversee the entire quality assurance team in terms of performing all our checks on a day-to-day basis. Because for us, we don't compromise quality at St. Lucia Distillers. So all our processes and checks, procedures have to be maintained. So I oversee my staff. And of course, as the quality assurance coordinator, I oversee the entire process in terms of procedures and processes to make sure that we definitely stick to what our procedures and standard operating procedures are.
So every bottle gets tested by you. We know that every bottle that we've touched has gone through Duplessis.
Oh yes. I am safe to say that every single batch that is produced, we have evidence to show that it is quality assurance checked.
I will add in my piece here. He abuses some of us people
He's a
who
stickler.
are on his tasting panel. He abuses us. Oh, he uses us a lot.
Yes, as a master blender, I mean, personal preference, you have to rule this out for sure. So I like to share out with the entire team. I like to hear opinions. We critique deeply here at St. Lucia Distillers. And of course, as a master blender, sometimes you feel offended, but it actually aids you with producing a world-class and quality product that the entire world can enjoy.
So when you say sometimes I'm guessing there's criticism or a negative reaction. Is that to a particular blend you're working on, or like how does that manifest?
It often relates to a particular blend. I mean, prototypes are presented to the panel, and as a master blender, you tell yourself, I know deep down there's a quality blend in there that should be chosen. But again, it is personal preference with you as a blender doing the final assessment before you present to the team. And sometimes the results come back, the panel, they tell you they don't like none of them. And some of them, they want them tweaked. But as a master blender, you have to be humbled and you have to have that calmness where you have to accept as is and go back to the drawing board, do what you have to do, tweak a little bit, and then present again. And that's how we work at Lucia Distillers. Teamwork is very important.
That brings up an interesting question to me. One thing that I was interested about going into this interview was just how often are you working on a new blend? Is it all the time? And do you have instructions coming from people in the company saying like, we want something like this? Or is it just a creative exercise to constantly be trying to find new interesting blends and things like that? What does that life cycle of a blend look like?
Well, at St. Lucia Distillers, normally, as the master blender, you get presented with a project. Okay. Meaning that it can be raised up by sales and marketing who has an idea that they want to launch a product, and they often present the criteria that they want you as a master blender to work around. But being the master blender, where on a day-to-day basis, you get involved in the top-up exercise where we assess our casks in storage, the different years. Alongside the cellar master, you always get a feel for what you currently have in stores.
The inventory, so to speak.
Yes, that's correct. So whenever that idea is presented, you as the master blender have to be quick thinking. Right away, you have to snap and say, it's like putting a puzzle together. I know exactly what casks to head towards, what finishes, what edges. So right away, you can go ahead. I mean, it's trial. You can do some small scale quick blending just to get an initial feel. And then in the end now, you present them and tell them, yes, I know how I will make it work with X, Y, Z. And of course, costing is very important. Marketing also works with a costing. So you as the master blender have to know how deep you can dig into that bond in terms of aging and what you can use to present that final product cost-wise, but of course quality-wise as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. A few months back, John and I did kind of like a fake blending exercise. We had Karsten and Niels from E&A Shear in Amsterdam on the podcast, and we went through their exercise of like we made up a fake product and like came up with price points, and it's really hard. It's hard to kind of like figure out what's going to work and what kind of rums you can use in order to like meet that price point and stuff.
That is one of the challenges that you have as a master blender. Sometimes to present the product that you think will work, when you go and you do that price check and you assess it, it's out of the range. So you now as a master blender have to use that prototype you have there and roll back sort of to adjust in terms of ages and components and quantities to make it stay in that loop, but to make the price point reach into that range that they want to work with. So it at times be a little challenging, but again, once you know exactly what rums to work around in terms of the quantities and the types, then you just go on, you do your stuff and tweak back until you get something that can work.
So on the note of the rum itself, I'd love to get from each of you because the rums that you make to me are very distinctive. They taste like St. Lucia rum. And I always want to make sure I'm doing the category of the distillery justice when people ask me how it's different from other rums. So what to each of you is kind of the signature of St. Lucian rum, and how do you describe what makes it distinct from, say, Barbados, Jamaica, other countries with long rum making traditions that people are familiar with?
Well, we always say, and Denny and I actually had that discussion as a team. We were discussing it and saying that characteristic to our rums, there's always that sweetness on the nose and the spiciness on the palate. Then based on which still and so it came from, you may get other characteristics such as the salt, the slight, well, you always get oak as well, and the definitely wood, and we get it even from young distillates, right, quite early in the aging process.
And it's amazing at St. Lucia Distillers, where we're located in the valley. In about 2 to 3 years, when you assess these maturity, it's like the quality that it presents to you is like you can actually pick up oak and wood from as early as 2 to 3 years. And it's amazing. When you look at some other young rums from some other companies, in terms of St. Lucia, our rums from as early as 2 to 3 years, you can get that nice, pleasant oak and wood present. And it amazes me. Sometimes I get surprised and so shocked as a master blender when I assess some of these materials. And I'm like, they're young and why they so already? It's like just the quality of aging for us here at St. Lucia Distillers.
So you guys, you realize why we appointed him as the master blender, right? I mean, you could hear the passion. Yeah. It's like, okay.
I love it.
Yes. And I can honestly say that every time I get a sample of a cask, it's like, it leaves me in suspense. It's like, expect to be wowed. And I can tell you often not, especially when you head from 5 years onwards, you presented with a gem. Some of these rums, the notes that we get, tropical fruits, for instance, if our John Doe 2 pot still, ripe mango. I mean, I absolutely love that note. And every time I get it, it brings that joy to me in my heart. It's like, this thing is in the rum. It is not an extract that was put in there. It is not mango juice that was poured in there, but it is from the aging in the valley. And that our column still, we get notes of marmalade, orange, ripe pear. I love that smell. Yeah. And each still is unique in its own character when they age. For instance, we have the John Doe and the Vendome mix distillery that we have aging. We get nice hints of pineapple and mint and grapefruit. That is very, very lovely. And as a master blender, I mean, when you assess these maturates and you get all these notes, it's like when you presented with a task to put in a blend to present, and you want to present a quality blend, giving you rums with these kind of characters, it actually makes the job very, very interesting and a bit fun that you actually have all these to play with in the different amounts. When you mix them together, trust me, the final product, what it presents to you is like a whole bouquet of all these notes. And one of the things I like as a master blender with our St. Lucia rums, that note from our pot stills in particular, and one of our column still rums is like we get that note of honey, which is signature to it, and it enhances our blending, meaning that it enriches our nose on our blends. And for me, St. Lucia rum, the old blends, when you assess it, there is always that signature of honey that you can get on the nose and on the palate as well.
Interesting. Well, I know another signature is definitely going to be passion that goes into it.
Yeah, that's right.
Like I said, you can hear it. It's great.
And for me, I'm being honest, it's a joy because our rums age so well in this valley.
Yeah. I was going to say I was jealous of you all already, but now I'm like double jealous of just hearing how amazing this must be, this job of yours. Yeah.
One of the challenges you can face as a master blender is that assessing the rums, and in terms of the ages that you pick up, there's some form of expectancy that you expect in terms of character for these materials. And if it's not being delivered, it makes your life hell as a blender, meaning that you have to go around, juggle a lot more into the inventory to actually find casks to deliver what you want to present that masterpiece as a master blender. And the good thing about St. Lucia Distillers rums and the maturates is like often they age very well. And I can say, and I can attest, being part of assessments of these barrels in our current top-up process, where we keep a close eye on them as we go along throughout the year. What we see is that if we detect any off notes, any undesirable notes that we detect early, often and not give recommendations to the cellar master as to what to do with these rums, whether we decast, recast, whether we blend with some ages that we have, or we mix different proportions, but we always monitor them, keep a quality check on them as we move along. It's like monitoring a baby as they grow.
Yeah.
And often or not, as the master blender, what you get presented in these barrels is a gem.
So, and I think we could talk a lot more and drill down even deeper into, you mentioned the different types of stills that you have, and we'll get there.
Yes.
I think it may be good for us and for some of our listeners to also give an overview before we get into that too much of St. Lucia Distillers' portfolio. So I know you have Bounty Rum, Chairman's Reserve, and Admiral Rodney, which I'm a super fan of. And I know there's also...
I am too. I'm proud to say that.
There's the 1931, and then the
Don't
Denros.
forget Denros.
Yes.
Denros. Denros is a local brand, yes.
Yes,
that's only in St. Lucia, right?
Yes, local high strength.
Got
local
it.
high strength.
So all of those, you have all these brands. Can you give us, Margaret, we'll start with you. What do you tell people when they ask you about all the different brands, and how do you make them distinct for people?
Okay, well, the main differentiation in those brands is the base product, that distillate that has gone into them. So Denros is a strong rum that is straight off the column, and it's bottled at 80% alcohol. It's like a commodity product used in St. Lucia. Every home would have a bottle of Denros, and it is what people use to make the local spice rums and
any extracts, any fruit extracts,
everything. Yeah.
Honestly, that spirit, which is our spirit one that we pull from the highest plate on the column still, it's very, very clean in character, very little congeners, and it's able to extract a lot faster flavors from whatever fruit you like. So people in St. Lucia tend to use it a lot to prepare their home extracts, their
It's
spices.
great at like taking on flavor.
Right.
And also it's very sweet. So you can also consume it as is. It's sweet, and people often just add fruit juices to it, add some soft drinks to it, and they consume it as is. Yeah.
For a lot of the rum punches in the hotels. So
Definitely.
Yeah. Then you have the Bounty. Bounty is a 2 to 3 year old column still rum. Which is, a good mixing rum. It is the rum of St. Lucia. If you come to St. Lucia, it is the most popular rum in St. Lucia. It is what St. Lucians drink. Bounty rum invokes national pride. This is home, for St. Lucia.
Am I correct in that it's really just been more recently that it's been available in some export markets? Is that right?
Absolutely. Until... It's only about 3 years now. It's only since Spiribam came on board that we've started to export Bounty rum. It was always meant for the local markets. We lack that. I have to admit, we lack that confidence to really put our rums out there.
Yes. And I always told them, being on the inside, realizing that quality, I always told myself that one day I will see Bounty go out to the world and people will react to it in terms of quality, because I felt, like I mentioned, 2 to 3 years, our maturates are just so nice. That spicy, nice character that you get. It's so
very
rich.
Easy drinking. And we have flavors in it. It has, it's quite a wide variety, and it's a colorful brand, just like our St. Lucian personalities. Apart from that, you got the Chairman's Reserve. Chairman's Reserve was born in 2001, and this brand came out of Laurie Barnard wanting to do something new, wanting to diversify. He decided he's going into pot stills, we were making these pot still rums, and we had no idea what to do with them. And then he decided, okay. Meantime, he's been sampling them all the time in the lab.
Oh yes. I'm always expecting to see him every day, especially around lunchtime. During his walkabout, he'll be always creeping on me.
Sampling this rum. So at the time, he was the chairman of St. Lucia Distillers. So that's why we came up with the name. We had a marketing guy called Barry Hart at the time, and he goes, that's the Chairman's Reserve. He's been reserving it for himself. Let's launch a brand. So the idea was we launched a brand which was a blend of the column still as well as the pot still rums. And so this is how we came out with the Chairman's Reserve. So it is the base distillate, the base rum is different. And then as time went on, we launched Admiral Rodney in 1981. Admiral Rodney, actually came out before Chairman's, didn't do well because St. Lucia was not ready for an aged rum. Can you imagine that? We were not ready. We tried launching an aged rum. We weren't ready, and we had to relaunch later.
Yeah, everybody was so into bounty, and they stuck to it.
And it is really and truly, in essence, Admiral Rodney is the column still, but aged much later. I mean, Admiral Rodney, we have as old as 18-year-old rum in Admiral Rodney. So we have some very aged rums in there. In fact, Admiral Rodney was what gave us the confidence and really, I mean, for me, I think that was where I truly appreciated what we were doing here, in that we hired this gentleman to come in, because remember, the first try had been a disaster, right? So we brought this gentleman back in, and I was trying to remember what year it was. In the early 2000s. We brought this gentleman back in and asked him to come and help us blend Admiral Rodney. And he was a retired gentleman who'd worked for another distillery for many years. And when he blended this rum, it took him one day, where he thought he was going to take a whole week. It took him one day to do the blend. And he said to us, "You guys have the most amazing rum that I've ever tasted in my life." And he said, and this was an easy task and a pleasure to do. And when the man said that, our heart warmed, and we were like, "Are you kidding me?"
That'll give you some confidence.
Definitely. I mean,
and that is when I really appreciated that St. Lucia Distillers, we needed to be out there with the rest of the world, in that we were as good as everybody and sometimes even better. We were just unknown. And this guy, he really gave our confidence a boost. And I mean, I'm trying to remember, I think his name is Sonny Rodriguez. That was the name of the gentleman.
Yeah, Sonny
Rodriguez. And it certainly boosted our confidence. And that is where we started with Admiral Rodney. Things like the 1931. Well, Laurie Barnard was always trying out stuff. And we have all these casks there that we were really and truly not doing anything with. And 1931 was an opportunity for us to use up a lot of the stock we have and just be creative, go wild. So Denny didn't get, you got a bit of it, but Mr. Harris was the one who really had fun with that.
Being around because I was with him checking these barrels. I mean,
right.
He was like, "Okay, I see somewhere that we can touch up some of these casks. So I like that idea. Let me go at it." And he actually said, "Yes, some of these casks I think will work, especially with the 1931 being a blend that would change every year." He felt that he had an idea, and he got a way to actually use these barrels to produce some quality rums that we actually saw in these 1941 blends that were done.
Right, and since then, it's become more of a standard blend, right? It doesn't change as often now. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, we've standardized the rums. I mean, I think it's a big part of helping us be able to take our rums global by having brands. You're able to register your brands and able to export under specific brands. So we now have one. What we've done is try to choose probably one of the more popular blends of the lot, Denny?
Yes, actually it was a combination of the last three, where that we felt that the black version, where we actually used the sugarcane Laurie's aged cane for the first time. Okay. And it will always remain a signature with me, the black box.
I remember
was the one here where we actually introduced the aged cane that we was very instrumental in producing and allowing us to reach that moment where we were able to use it. And the last two versions, which were the white and the pink, after the black one, we felt that these three blends, Mr. Harris at the time looked at these three and he said that if we use these three blends and we look at the similarities in the components and we take the slight components that were different, we could just come up with one continual blend that would cover all these three, and we felt that the world would be able to embrace this blend. And that's why we came up with the continual blend that we have now as Chairman of 1950.
So you kind of took bits and pieces from each of those three blends to create, something that kind of tied them all together.
So for instance, the cane which we used in the black box, the 4th edition, we actually have that cane, that aged cane, in the continual Chairman's Visit 1941. So that is where it actually came from.
And when you say aged cane, you're referring to some of the rum that you make there from fresh sugarcane juice, correct?
That's correct. Okay. Crushed hair, fermented hair, distilled hair, and aged hair. All through Laurie's innovation.
Yeah, on that note, we've touched on a lot of the different kind of, you just have this array of, you have the 2 John Doerr pot stills, you have the Vindome still, you have the coffee column still, you're making rums from molasses, you're making a little bit of rum from that fresh sugarcane juice that you grow right there. It's like, I feel like there are so many possibilities at your disposal as a master blender. And you spoke a little bit earlier about how great that is, but I could also see the other side of the coin being it could be challenging to work with so many different options. And I was interested to ask, like, are there challenges that come with it? Is it ever overwhelming to have so many options at times? And we didn't even get into yet, which we'll talk about more in a bit, all the different types of casks that you're using as well. So there's just so many different variables. And how do you manage all of that?
Well, the challenges can be, if you do not keep an eye on all these age rums that you have in the inventory, as a master blender, when you're presented with these projects to work on, you sometimes have to brainstorm and think for a very long time as to what exactly can make that project happen. But I can safely say, and I'm grateful for that thorough process that we started through our new owners, keeping a close eye on our inventory, you actually get a feel for all these various types of barrels as you go along throughout the year. So deep down, you have a snapshot in your brain of all these different types of casks and where they are in terms of the ages. So as the master blender now, when you're presented with a project to work on, you can actually pinpoint exactly which areas and which types of materials to pull out and collect samples to do that blend, which would actually give you the character that you want.
So it sounds like as long as you have kind of systems, processes in place making sure you have a handle on your inventory, that's kind of the key to managing so many different variables.
Yes, as a master blender, you need to keep a close check on the materials as they go along. So you always have that in your memory. So as the projects come along, then you know exactly where to go. But if you do not do this and you let the long time pass, then often or not, it makes the work even harder and longer, where you actually have to request samples, go and check them. And often or not, the guys in casks are always at it, busy at times, and you have that waiting period where you have to just have no choice but to just wait on them when they're able to present you with these samples. So it can actually make your time to develop a blend a lot longer.
But Danny's not confessing that. In fact, we've had a couple of times where we have had a few challenges. For example, we've got 50 mystery casks right now. Which is crazy.
Mystery casks.
Serious fun.
Is this a sequel to the Forgotten Casks?
Yeah, this is the mystery casks.
They could be. They could be. We've just had an exercise where we actually physically. So we've always had computer programs with all the casks laid out. So we knew what approximately we're supposed to have, and we knew our numbers are pretty accurate. But we're not. We're building 2 new cellars. We should be moving in by March into 2 of them that they can hold 7,000 casks. So we'll be moving into those cellars. So we've been going through and topping up and checking our stocks and verifying. So we've come across 50 casks, which are not on our on our system, and they have lost their tags because the casks are tagged. And so we've been Denny's having some fun right now. Tasting.
Yeah, how do you reverse engineer that? How do you figure it out?
Denny, you need help.
Well, I can safely attest, and I can thank the retired Mr. Harris. He often would pull me over, call me. I mean, I would be about my busy schedule, and he'd call me like, check this too. He would give it to me blind and tell me, do you detect any similarities or differences? What is that? And then this is where he actually trained me to signature each type of material and to know exactly what to look for, and how do you rule out in terms of the different pot stills, John Doe 1, John Doe 2, in terms of unknowns. if you're presented with unknowns from these different stills, how you can eliminate and know which is which.
So it's like you've been working to this moment. You're prepared. This is the ultimate test, right?
And he was often telling me, I feel I can retire now because, I mean, you understand, you do everything. I mean, Mr. Harris would tell me, oh, I'm at work today, but I don't think I need to be. I can go do something today because you're there. I mean, he had so much, I can
confidence in you.
He had so much confidence in me, and I am very grateful. When he personally told me that he was the only one he would feel comfortable working alongside. And of course, like I saw, we both had that calmness in us, and we were able to handle pressure a lot. So he felt that he wanted me alongside him most of the day. Unfortunately, I couldn't. I had a task to take on, but early on, we would be here very early, and he would like, boy, I do like that blend, what I get this morning there. Come and smell it, and tell me if you pick up what I pick up. And it is where he taught me that because of the complexity of our materials, they're so complex in terms of the congeneric profiles. Like when you put a blend together, especially these age blends, the resting time that we have to devote to them it has to be long. It's like the profile can change over time. And he always tells me to make sure that these blends are not rushed, requesting enough time, weeks, possibly sometimes a month. It depends on the type of project so that you can get a comfortable feel for that blend. Because our blends are so complex, and putting this together, what it brings out, sometimes the true quality doesn't come out after sometimes weeks to a month. And if you assess it too early, you don't get the quality that you're supposed to get in terms of the final blend.
So it needs time to kind of
gel,
to marry
resting
together.
Time is very, that's right.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I remember hearing like the Chairman's Reserve original blend, that one rests for 6 months, right? Once you put everything together?
Yes. Because what we do is it has both pot still and column still. 2 different column still maturates, and the John Doe 2 pot still that we put together. That preliminary blend now is introduced into the bourbon cask for 6 months. We allow it to marry, and what we do is we decast that blended preliminary Chairman's Reserve rum, and what we do, we use it as form of a base, and we add some more aged pot still, John Doe 2 and column still rums to it to bring up that final Chairman's Reserve blend that we have as the Chairman's Reserve original.
It's like a tune-up. Like
yes.
Just give it a little hit.
And what we realize is the 6 months, what it does is it gives some form of calmness and depth to that final blend that you get. And that is what we see when we taste Chairman's Reserve in terms of the depth and the smoothness that we get in 6 months, because again, like I mentioned, because of the quality aging that we have in the valley where we're located, it enhances our blends to get a little more character in terms of the depth. And what we see with Chairman's Reserve, when we rest that preliminary blend in this cask for 6 months, giving us that character to build up that final blend, it produces a beautiful product that we see Chairman's Reserve Original.
And coming off of Chairman's Reserve Original, I actually want to turn to something newer with Chairman's Reserve. And I wanted to mention one of the ways that a lot of our listeners have deepened their relationship with St. Lucia rum more recently is through the Master's selections of Chairman's Reserve. So we were hoping you could talk a little bit about how that program got started and what that process is like, and explore that a little bit.
Really and truly, the Chairman's Master Selection was as a result of people expressing a desire to buy our casks. We had a large number of casks. GBH had bought our company. They're looking at us and saying, oh, my God, you guys are so complicated. Your blends are so complex. You've got so many different things in that make up your rums. Sometimes I felt like we were being a bit criticized here.
Often at times,
yes, that's
for having too much in a small area.
And But then they've come to realize that, we all realize this is actually our strength. It's how complex our blends are. They're not easily reproduced.
That's right. That's right.
And it's what makes us unique and very different.
So very true.
It has now given the opportunity for people to come and taste. We've had our promotion where you can come and visit the distillery. We allow you to taste our distillates. We allow you to taste them as they age and how they transform over the years, and then people then get to see what we put in the final product. And there's been so much interest in that, and so much reaction from people asking about our, people preferring specific rums, and so
right.
And so we got to the point where, okay, there was an agreement, we'll sell to somebody. And I do remember Ian Burrell actually coming into St. Lucia.
I've heard of him.
Yes.
On behalf of somebody else. And they said to Ian, there'd been a promise to sell a cask, and Ian had to choose that cask. Do you remember that, Denny? So there was Ian with the guys in the cellar master, and the guys choosing, okay, so which one? So we can, okay, so let's take down this one. And then we had to draw samples, and then they tasted and realized, well, wait a minute, people actually want to come and sample and taste their own rum. So we're now deconstructing Chairman's Reserve and giving people an opportunity to buy a barrel. So every year we go through it will be now Denny and the cellar master. They will go through the list and see what casks that we have in excess, and now offer that to people so that you can choose your own rum, and then we will bottle it for you under the Chairman's Reserve brand. So that's really the concept behind it. But it really came out of demand. The rum geeks and
rum geeks like us. Exactly.
Yes. And I can honestly say that some of these components, when we look at them, some of these materials on their own, they can stand as a blended rum because of the character that you get.
Yeah.
That oak wood, that very beautiful sweetness that you get.
Right.
And of course, some of them, for instance, the older pot stills, you get beautiful notes of almond, chocolate, papaya, anise, and pineapple, some of which you can just sip in a rum. And it's just a cask, not a blended rum.
Yeah, I have to confess, I actually had a chance to go through this not too long ago with the Florida Rum Society, where they're doing a master selection of Chairman's Reserve, and Chris Funk walked us through it, and it was really, really great to, as you all are saying, it's interesting for rum geeks like us to get to explore the different components and deconstructions of what we already love so much with the Chairman's Reserve releases and other St. Lucia rums. So I have to ask you, knowing whose pick has been the most masterful of the master selection so far, and why is it the Florida Rum Society pick?
That's not a fair question.
Definitely.
Okay. Fair enough. We all know whose it is.
I am interested though. Is this like a negotiation, Denny, where like when they come to you saying we need some casks for the master selections, are you ever like, no, don't take those? Like I need these. Like what is that process like?
Believe you me, it is a negotiation at the highest level.
Yes, because we don't want to sell our house and we have to sleep outside.
Right.
Think of our blends and continue in terms of production. So we don't want to sell a lot of our age casks, for instance, that we might need for Admiral Rodney and Chairman's Reserve and 1931. And today or tomorrow we get a large order where we have to do a large volume blend and we're stuck. I will have the headache to try and figure out how to navigate around that. And I'm hoping that this doesn't happen. So with me being around, we'll keep a close eye on the inventory just to make sure that we don't get that extra pressure on ourselves in terms of blending, because we want to make sure that we continue producing quality blends. And of course, as the master blender, blending is something that you could also be able to navigate in terms of your formulation. So if you do have a certain year, you can always work around it by exploring different components. But we don't want to have to face that task too much at St. Lucia Distillers. So what we do is we keep a close eye on the inventory and we're able to present to the buyers what we think they can get.
I assure you, although there's no need to worry, because we've got 8,200 filled casks.
That's right.
That's
right.
Good news. That's good
I was
news.
just going to put an order in for 8,200 casks. That's funny that you mentioned that number. Oh.
So there you go. So you want us to sell our house and sleep outside? No. I won't want to sleep outside if it's cold.
We'll be making a few more this year.
No, I do think that's so fascinating, and it's been really fun for me just to get to sample several of those different master selection releases and just get a feel for the different characteristics of the stills. I know I was having a sample of one the other night someone sent me that was, I forget which pick it was, but I know it was 100% from the Vendome still. And that one just really spoke to me. There was just something about it. I was like, man, this is great. So transitioning a little bit, we've Margaret, you've made several references to Spirabaum, which are a lot of our listeners are familiar with. We've had Keo O'Brien from Spirabaum on the podcast before. She came mostly to focus on the Martinique brands in their portfolio.
Okay.
But it was actually on that episode we spent so much time. We didn't have enough time to talk about St. Lucia Distillers, and that's one of the moments when John and I were like, okay, we have to do it needs its own episode. So
she told me you guys had so much fun. She even forgot she was on an interview. She was laughing the whole way through.
That's our goal every time.
That's great. Yeah, no, we always have fun. And so since the partnership, the purchase happened, what have been the biggest changes? You've referred to some of them, but just looking at it at a high level over the last 4 to 5 years, what have been some of the biggest differences that has made for St. Lucia Distillers?
Well, I have to first of all say we were very fortunate. We got the best investor. Our previous owner was an insurance company. They had got into financial troubles, and so there was no choice but to sell the company. I mean, that company owned, apart from St. Lucia Distillers, they owned Ray and Nephew, they owned Angostura in Trinidad. So they owned quite a few distilleries, and St. Lucia Distillers was one of the first ones to be sold. And we were very fortunate that GBH purchased us. Because since then, having gone through 10 years of struggling financially, suddenly there's been a lot of investment. I mean, if you come to St. Lucia Distillers today, there's no place to even walk. Our yard is filled we're aging in the yard, okay?
Anywhere you can put the casks.
Wherever. So we're busy making rum and we're innovating and we're creating all of these new things, but we have nowhere to put them. So we've been putting it in the yard. So our yard is crowded. We filled with casks. Even the barrel filling process, the stuff, if it's raining, they can't do it because a lot of the barrel filling occurs outside. The casks are outside.
That's correct.
The hoses come through and they are filling outside. So we have a lot of old processes, a lot of upgrades that needed to be done. And GBH has most certainly there's been no expense spared. They are investing. They see St. Lucia Distillers as having huge potential, and they are making all the investments that we need. So we'll be moving into beautiful new warehouses, cellars in 2 months' time. We have a lovely barrel filling facility that's coming on board. They're going to be introducing a beautiful tour, beautifying our grounds. And all of this has been done, but nothing has been done to change our process and what we do and how we do it. So they have now embraced how we make our rum. They think highly, and I could tell from the international team and what their job they're doing now promoting our rums. They're doing an amazing job. They really feel highly and strongly about our rums. They have not changed the core of the company, but believe you me, they've certainly spending the money, putting in the necessary investments. So come visit us in another 2 to 3 years. I mean, it's been a few years ongoing, and we will be totally transformed. I can't wait to show us to the world when everything is done, as our changes occur. I mean, they're redoing our fermentation process. They've redone fermentation, but we've left our finishing fermenters just as, same concrete finishing fermenters so that nothing changes. It's just tidy it up, refurbish it, but leave it exactly as it is. So they're not changing anything. Obviously, we now have a new French boss.
Indeed.
But I must say he's very nice. So we warmly welcome him.
Indeed,
and we've got to learn a little bit of French and to integrate. And
oui.
That's the extent of our French knowledge.
Yes.
And they've also brought their skills in the area of packaging. Let me tell you, we made amazing rums, but our packaging was so lousy. Oh, they've fixed our packaging, and you'll see. So you're seeing a lot more beautiful packaging, the same products, but a lot more beautiful packaging, better presented, clear storylines, and bringing our message to the world. So that is how Spiribam, and then also now we have a team that we can work with. I mean, the marketing people who've come on board, the sales people. I mean, when you start talking like Kieran, Ben, and then in Europe you've got Matthew and Audrey. I mean, these guys are amazing. I could sit and listen to them for hours, and I guess they could listen to us as well too when we start talking about production. But it's just, we have a lot more resource at our fingertips, and so this has been an amazing experience, and I can't wait to see where we go to in the future.
Yeah, most definitely.
It's just a pity Laurie Barnard is not around to see, because he gave us that solid background. He, if it wasn't for that groundwork that he did all these years ago, we would not be as successful as we are.
I remember oftentimes when I just came in, I used to hear him saying, I won't be around to see these rums. You guys will take care of it. And he would always pass on and say it loudly by me. I don't know if he probably saw that.
He had a premonition.
But he was very innovative, and he was very quick thinking, and he was a great thinker in terms of aging. So he often wanted to experiment. And we have some wine casks there that came through his innovation. And oftentimes he would always say, I left them there for you guys. I mean, you guys are checking them, but I wouldn't be around to see them used. And I must say, we are here today, and I'm privileged to be the master blender for St. Lucia Distillers. And these samples, what I see in them is like, I always remember him, because here we are today with these beautiful maturates, and they're there, and I'm looking forward to using them to create some fantastic stuff in the near future. I mean, all because of Mr. Barnard and his innovation.
Mr. Barnard's name came up on the previous interview we did with Dr. Frank Ward from who was managing director of Mount Gay for many years, chairman of Worst Pub. I'm sure you're past.
I know Frank very well.
And he at the end of our conversation, Laurie's name came up in passing, and Frank actually said, as a quote, one of the unsung heroes of the rum industry. Absolutely. And really mentioned that he was way ahead of many other distilleries at the time. And I feel like we're kind of, rum consumers now are seeing the fruits of that labor in the output of your distillery. And Margaret, I know you worked alongside him for so many years. What to you are some of the enduring ways he impacted the rum industry?
Well, Laurie Barnard was like a sponge, I keep saying. Everybody and anybody he spoke to. I mean, so he was always speaking to people. So you'd hear people like Ed Hamilton, Alexander Gabriel, Frank Ward. I mean, wherever you go around the world, anybody he could find who was into rum and was, I mean, don't ask for the Jamaicans. We had Lloyd Forbes. We had, I mean, everybody he would invite them to visit us, and he would go visit them, and he would absorb everything that everybody else was doing and would bring it back to us. And it was always a new idea. We need to try this. We need to try that.
And I can say I have some samples that he brought back from his trips, and I cherish them. They're in a box, and every time I open that box, I remember Mr. Barnard. He would like walk in and tell us, look, when we open the bag, it's like a rum sample. I want you guys to check on this. I find it interesting. He was a thinker. He was always at it, always wanted to stay in the game. I mean, he read a lot. He was a deep thinker, and he loved to explore. And that's why we actually ended up with that aged sugarcane that we have here.
Yep. Yeah. And so I had to keep at my bedside. I always kept a notebook and and it was for Laurie Barnard, because he would call 10 o'clock in the evening. Margaret, I don't mean to disturb you, but I just had a great idea. Don't you think we should be doing this and this and this and this. And or he'd be in his car. And from the time he leaves, the phone is on and he's calling. So yes. Surprised. So I'm just thinking, this is what we should be doing. And what about this, and shouldn't I ask the lab to do this? What about, we have an opportunity to invest and do this. And so shouldn't we try that? Don't you think? What do you think about that? So it was like, always. It was like, okay, what is he coming out with now? Fortunately, his wife was a similar type personality. So I think they worked off each other. They were so full of energy and ideas and what have you, because even she would call and say, well, I have an idea for the tour you should try. So I realized they worked well together. But yes, that was one of the things I always remembered. But surprisingly, he was quite a shy guy. Very quiet, very shy. Yes, he wouldn't. When you speak rum, he transformed into a totally different person.
I can attest to that. Most times he would come very quiet. He would sometimes come around lunchtime, stop. That's the news about this tourism thing, and that's the only time I would hear him speak. Apart from that, is rum.
Yeah.
The next thing he would come to speak about is rum.
Yeah. Rum and
he was very passionate about the process as well. He would come to me, Danny, how are my cells looking? When I tell him, they're looking very healthy, very robust, they're looking good. He would actually come to the microscope. Can I have a look? He wants to see.
Wow.
Oh yeah, I can see them. These guys look good. Yeah, and he would just walk about. And it showed me from early that this was a man with a passion for rum, and he was very involved. And he had a great passion for the entire process, from molasses down to the finished product.
So in the spirit of Laurie Barnard, then, are you able to talk a little bit about what might be up next for St. Lucia Distillers? Is there anything you guys are experimenting with right now? Or
maybe some of those mystery casks.
Mystery casks. Casks in the yard.
We don't forget we've got the mystery casks. We've been recently playing a lot with finishes.
Laurie
had never really been into finishing. I guess we had never really considered that. He thought about when the distillate going directly into the barrel, different barrels, and then aging for the period of time. But now we're like Denny's saying, we're seeing a transformation of the rums as we try different finishings. So we've been experimenting with some of that as well. And, we can't reveal all our secrets here right now. But,
well, just some. We don't need them all. We only need,
one or two secrets,
That those are really along the lines that we're working on. Ian did reveal in a previous interview. I was with Ian, the distillery manager, that we've just invested in fermentation, which means he will have a good supply of fermentation, and we've got the Vendome still that has 9 plates. So I think Ian is planning to do some experimentation there. And I have a personal dream. This was Laurie Barnard's last wish, was for us to go into high ester rum. And I do hope before I retire, we're able to do that. That's one of our dreams here, to work on the high ester rum. So we're starting the process for that one.
That I imagine will lead to some really fun tasting sessions for Denny and everyone, right?
Definitely.
Well, I know anytime the word high ester comes up, the people who are really into rum get extremely excited. So
firing up the bass.
And I count myself among those in that group. So
nice.
And
Laurie really wanted to put down a pit and for us to do one. So I'm hoping we see his dream through.
Hopefully.
Excellent. Well, I know we've kept you into the evening over there, so we won't keep you much longer. We do have one final segment.
That's okay.
That I gave you some advance warning about, but it's the special rapid fire segment of the episode. I have an idea here, something we haven't tried before. When we have two guests on, in the past, we've only had one of them do it, but you have both been so delightful. I'd love to find a way to get both of you to respond to each question. So, John, what I'm thinking is normally we put 60 seconds on the clock. I'm maybe thinking I bump it up to 90 seconds, and then maybe each of you give a response after each question.
Problem.
So, Margaret, you could give a response, and then pause, and then Denny, you can give your answer to the question. How about that?
Sure, pleasure.
Okay, we'll try.
You know, the good news
problem.
is there's no wrong answers in this,
This is true. This is true. All
So,
right.
John, any advice you want to give them before we start?
No, this is either going to be amazing or go off the rails immediately. We will see, but I am so looking forward to trying it. All right, Will, whenever you're ready. Yeah.
All right, so I have 90 seconds on the clock, and go.
All right, neat or on the rocks?
On the rocks.
On the rocks for me.
All right, column, pot, or blend?
Column.
Column for me.
All right, molasses, cane juice, or cane syrup?
Oh, molasses.
Molasses for me.
Okay.
All the way.
So far the same. All right. I
know.
couldn't help but notice that both of you have alliterative names like comic book characters. Are you willing to admit that you're both secretly rum superheroes?
I don't think so, but Danny is.
Well, yeah. To some extent, I will say yeah.
Okay, Denny is. All right.
Part-time superhero.
That's right. Vendome or coffee still?
Ooh, coffee still.
Coffee still for me.
All right. John Doe 1 or John Doe 2?
JD1.
Yeah, John Doe 1 for me.
Okay.
Yes.
Can you divulge the fate of the person who was responsible for forgetting about the casks that were eventually used in Chairman's Forgotten Casks bottling? I mean, what happened to them? Did they get fired or did they get promoted?
He is still around and he refuses to admit he forgot the cask. Okay,
That's right.
So don't you dare mention that to him. He will get angry with you.
I mean, oftentimes I tend to tease him a lot.
All right.
Thanks for forgetting.
Yes. All right. Your favorite mixed drink using St. Lucia rum?
Oh, for me, it's mojito using Bounty Lime.
For me, it's I like the Negroni where we use German spice and Campari.
All right,
that's time.
All right, that's it. Oh, let me tell you, you're so lucky because I had ones on there. You didn't want to get to those. So.
Denny, by the way, I agree with you. I love rum Negronis. I was just talking about that recently on another episode. So I was pleased to hear you say that.
I was away on vacation a few weeks ago and I saw your emails and I was going through them and that's what I had in my hand.
There you go.
German spice Negroni. I actually love German spice. I mean, it's such a beautiful spice rum, such a beautiful flavor.
Yeah, that's something we didn't get to talk about enough. I know,
right?
St. Lucia has a really nice spiced rum. That's
whole
kind of like a thing over there,
rum.
right? Yeah.
Yes. What you would find in St. Lucia is that St. Lucians don't actually drink the bottled spice rum. Everybody has their own recipe. So we export more of our spiced rums than we actually sell locally. That Denros is the product used for the local spice rums.
Mm-hmm. What's the best locally made, like homegrown spiced rum that you had? Who makes the best one?
Oh my. I heard one of the best ones was a guy going around door to door selling in the communities, but I haven't tasted his own. Truthfully, I can't tell you. There's just so many. Everybody, true. Yeah. You're talking thousands of different spice rums.
One thing I can say is each spice rum is unique because people tend to go all out to find different spices and some use fruits and each in their different amounts. I mean, you'll taste a spice from two different people in the neighborhood and you'll never find them doing the same spice. Although they use the same components, but the way that they mix them up, they will never be the same. And that's what makes St. Lucian spice.
It's like a fingerprint.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some of them actually have the secret formula that they won't tell you at all.
Yeah.
They might tell you some of what they use, but deep down, there's something that they didn't tell you.
A lot of them are for medicinal purposes as well. So it depends on your mood, your spirit, whatever ailment you have.
Right.
So.
Well, rum cures all, as we
some
like
of the
to say.
fishermen, before they go out to sea early morning, They would take a little bit of the home spice.
Teddy, don't expose them. Please.
We better wrap this up before it does go off the rails and somebody gets exposed here.
We don't even have a drink.
I know, right?
All right. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us.
Yes,
I know I've got to get 2 trips to St. Lucia on the calendar because I need to see what it looks like before all of the changes you're talking about, so I can do the before and after comparison, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
All right, so that was our interview with St. Lucia Distillers CEO Margaret Monplaisir and Master Blender Denny Duplessis. What a great, fun interview with them, and so much passion, as we mentioned. It was such fun to talk to them, and the insights that they were able to give us on St. Lucia Distillers was just really a great conversation. We hope that you enjoyed that as much as we did, and if you did, we want to know about it, and we want to hear about how are the interviews going, and what are some of the things that you may want to hear about when we do these interviews. What are some of the questions you may want to ask, or who are the people that you might like to hear from in the future? So if you want to give us that information, reach out to us at host@rumcast.com. That's HOST @rumcast.com, or feel free to hit us up on social media at Rumcast at Instagram or on Facebook. Anything else to add before we get out of here?
I would just say also be sure to head over to the Rumcast website when you get a chance at rumcast.com. We added, as we mentioned last week, a page dedicated to keeping track of rum societies around the world. So hopefully being able to pair as many people up with a local community of rum lovers wherever they live. It's a work in progress. We're always adding more. If there are some that we're missing, same email address, let us know, host@rumcast.com. That page is at rumcast.com/rum-societies. Or if you just go to rumcast.com, there's a link at the top that says Rum Societies. So check that out. As always, if you like what you're hearing on the podcast, please leave us a review at Apple Podcasts. That's always really helpful. It helps more people find the show. And I think that's it. So until next time, I'll talk to you then, John.
All right.